Howdy, good morning, folks. I'm still getting my stuff together over here. I'll post to a couple of places that I'm starting and what we're doing and all that stuff. And then I hear my coffee bubbling away, not far from me. And I'll go fetch a fresh cup and we'll dive in. Today is not going to be visually exciting, I don't expect, simply because we're going to be doing boring database stuff. But maybe for some of us it could be considered technically exciting, depending on your definition of excitement and fun. But we're going to go through securing our SQL objects and the ideas and principles behind that and how we work that with a cloud-based identity system so that we can get rid of this idea of having credentials in our connection strings attached to our root host process and stuff like that. Because that's something that's always given me the creeps. Don't drop your switch, Frightful. Those things are not cheap. All right, I need a Safari window. And I gotta open Twitch itself. True. Yeah, phones are even more expensive than switches these days. All right, I want to go to the channel. No, I don't. I want to go to my dashboard and the stream mangler and pop out the chat. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the repair costs on handheld consoles and stuff are banana pants. All right, let's go to single cam focus. So yesterday, I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm going to turn on my robot. I have a little follow cam robot thing that I picked up last week or the week before, and I need to flip which camera is being used to my phone camera. Here we go. See, it's got like automatic zoom and follow and all kinds of fun stuff like that. I love technology. And then when I get over to the main screen, I can switch things up again. Yeah, I still haven't gotten around to figuring out how to undelete messages and all that stuff. And I did not get a chance to update my Nightbot settings last night because I was busy getting main screen turn on. I was busy setting this up. Now, is my database? Oh, I changed my... I changed the connection string that I'm using. Just stop that. So I swapped the locally running application from using my local language model to using an Azure-based language model. And we might be in an error state. So, because I switched that over to use a different different database that isn't fully set up yet. So I guess testing is out. Let's see what the error was. Partials, game tools, blah, 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 blah. Thread destroyed. We had an exception with a circuit. Microsoft Data SQL Client SQL exception. Timeout expired. Timeout period elapsed during the post login phase. Okay. Well, I guess I should talk about our SQL database and how we've got it organized. Software is basically a warehouse that feels like a cloud, says Frightful. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. So on the server, I've got a login specifically for GH user data. Now, I don't want to do that when we migrate this database to Azure. Now, my application logs into SQL Server as GH user data with a username and password, and I have to store that username and password with the application or adjacent to the application, and that's not something that I like doing. So instead of that, well, let's back up another step. So GH user logs into the server and is mapped to a user on the database that has permissions on specific schema. And what a schema is it's like, think of the different objects in your database as being cards in a card catalog. And a schema is one drawer on that card catalog. And I guess that's a terrible metaphor for anybody younger than me and my siblings. Think of it like a filing cabinet, maybe, where each drawer is a schema and the folders represent the tables and stored procedures and views and stuff like that that belong to that schema. It's a way of organizing the items in the database. Maybe if I sketch it. I'll sketch it out here. We'll start with a new slide, get rid of that, get rid of this. So we've got a database. Edit text. And this is for SQL specifically. So we've got a SQL Server. And I want to write justify. Nope, must be this one. Push that up at the top. All right, so we've got our SQL Server. Inside that SQL Server, we've got individual databases. Text fill will go black on this. Edit text. We've got a database. And we'll send this guy to the right and the top. Now, inside the database, we have what are called schema. And I need to make that a little bigger. edit text, schema, and push that off to the right and up to the top. All right. And now inside the schema, we have and I want to go with a white background, black text, edit text, tables. Whoops. I can make that a little smaller. And we have views. And we have stored procedures, and so on. We have a spammer. Hi, spammer. Goodbye, spammer. And let's just add one more called other stuff. Now, a lot of people don't use schemas a lot. I don't tend to see them used super often. And when they are, they don't tend to use them necessarily for logical separation of concerns within the database. And you can have multiple schemas in your database. You can have, as far as I know, as many as you like. Now, you don't want to have too many because then it becomes too much for your brain to handle. But having a handful of them is, perfectly valid. So let's take this whole shebang and we're going to group those. Group. And I'm just going to shift that down a little bit. And let's add some text. Right here. Conceptual model. High level. All right. Now, our software and people connect to these databases via connection string or, whatever. They use a thing. And the software, and let's use a different color scheme for our code. Let's go with green. And we'll edit the text. Application. Go to the right and up to the top. There we go. And it's got, modules and stuff like that in it. But it connects to the database. Give me a shape. And give me a big chunky arrow. And we'll edit this text. Connection. Oh, that's hideous, isn't it? Let's delete that. Give me a big chunky horizontal arrow. Edit text. Connection. That isn't going to give me what I want. I better rotate it first. Now can I edit the text? What the heck? Who cares? Now that connection, they connect as a user. And so the application will log into the database, get mapped to a user, and that user is assigned access to one or more schema. Now, I've got multiple schema, or I'm going to have multiple schema in my database, although I may not have to carry a local user store in my database, which would make me exceptionally happy. But what that does is it allows me to set up different modules of my application so that I've got, let's say, give me another rectangle here. I'm going to shrink this up and rename, edit this text to user data access. And user data refers to data that users have created. And let's say system data access that would hold lists and configuration items and so on and so forth. So user data access will go that way. And our system data access will go this way. And I should probably change the colors on these guys. And I think I will, so that we've got some contrast. And let's go with a nice light orange. The upside down connection is bugging me, but I'm going to have to just let it go. So our system data access would be configured to connect as a user that has access to, and let's edit this text, system data schema, user data schema, and then, of course, as time goes by, we realize, holy crap, there's a whole lot more user data than there is system data, and we really ought to pull that out into its own service. So rather than having to go through a whole pile of pain, because a lot of systems don't have that type of model where there's a discrete access component for each schema. A lot of them, and I'm going to leave that part there, a lot of them just do this type of connection where it's app to database. And so anything running inside this app has access to anything running inside the database. And then you'll get problems where things in the user data access are accessing system data, and system data is accessing user data. And then when you realize that you've got a bottleneck and that you want to scale out the user data component so that there's multiple copies of it running so that it can handle all of the request pressure, you find out that everything's all tangled together and it's a very expensive, long time consuming process to get everything untangled. And of course that creates bugs in the application and you get all kinds of problems and nobody's happy. And it's just a big drag. So what I've preferred to do in the past few years is start putting logically related database objects together in their own schema, and then limiting access to the objects within the schema to a specific user credential. And I just realized that I haven't flipped my webcam over to use the robot. Here we go. That's better. That's more like it. Okay. So I've gotten more in the habit of doing things like that, which makes fracturing these individual inner software components out into their own things a whole lot easier. It also means that if I realize, you know what, holding game rules and all of that stuff that's relatively static in my database doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's probably a better way of storing it. Let's move it off to a structured file that I just store in blob storage or something like that. I can build that file, rewrite my system data access component, just that part, give it permissions to that file in blob storage, and now everything continues to flow as it did before without impacting the user data or anything else, because of course I haven't got any dependency from my user data into the system data. Okay, so how does that apply to what we're doing? Well, we've got a SQL database created on my local machine here. And we've got this GH user data, which is granted access to the user data schema. And the only table that I have right now is userdata.npcs. Now, I do have a SQL database set up in Azure, but I don't have any objects in it yet. So the very first thing I need to do is create this schema. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to script schema as create to a new query editor window. Great. And then I am going to script my table as create to new query editor window. Here we go. I've got a default on is public, default of get date for created date. All right. So I'm gonna need to shrink, shrink, shrink that, and here's Azure Data Studio. Now, I haven't monkeyed around with this all that much. So let's see here. Query, I need to connect. You gonna let me connect? Here we go. Databases. GM tool data. Open Sesame. Come on, you can do it. Although I noticed earlier that the status on this guy is okay. It's resuming right now. Good. Can I refresh my view? Nope, guess not. Here we go. Now it's online. All right. Yeah, fine. Refresh. Tables, views, security, all of that stuff, right? So let's go with a new query. I'm going to pop over here. And this is doing things manually, and my DevOps friends are going to be laughing at me. But I'm not a big scripted guy. And I'm going to change it to GM tool -data. Good. Run that. Man, it's completed successfully. Thing of beauty. And let's come over here and grab this guy. And we're already running in the context of that database. I don't need this anymore. Goodbye. And I can run it. And commands created successfully. Good. And now I can go new query. And I can say select star from user data dot NPCs. Go. And it should give me just nothing. And that is wonderful. Messages. That was sub-second. Thing of beauty. So there we go. Now, all that to say, I'm going to open my resource access. Let's come into SQL Server. And I believe there's that. I'm not going to have the breakpoint here. I'm going to drop my breakpoint here. And let's see what we get. Excuse me. Now that there's stuff here. So we'll go here, hit our breakpoint, step over. Role models is count 0. Good. We have a connection to the Azure database. And the Lord did grin. And now we'll create. Things are moving a whole lot faster now that we're connected to Azure. So let's make a new NPC. And I think I want a human who grew up on the streets and became a knight. And that knight's retired. All right. And now we'll generate our AI description. And this is running a whole lot faster now that I'm using somebody else's computer. And we've got a weathered man with a fair complexion and straight gray hair dressed in practical worn knight's armor. Gareth Stone is his name. Stoic and disciplined with a soft spot for the underprivileged. Let's save this. And go back to our list. And there he is. View. Fantastic. So we know that our Azure resources are working for our application, even though we're still running from our local machine. Now, rather than setting up a hierarchy where I've got let's edit our text, DB credentials. So right now in the code, I have only one schema in my database. And what I've done in the past to control who can access what, I've done one connection string per DB schema. And the connection string is really just the information with the username, the password, the name of the database, all of that stuff. One connection string per DB schema. Each EF entity framework DB context has its own connection string. So we're going to have to break this a little bit for moving to Azure. Pre-Azure DB credentials are going to be like that, right? And I'm going to send that back. All the way to the back. And I have to manage the username and password and all of that stuff in SQL. Credentials are managed by a human by hand. Not great. Using Azure, we are going to assign a managed identity to the application. Grant that add that managed identity to a list of user-defined database roles in the SQL service. And then, if we pull out system data access or user data access into its own discrete service, it's going to get a new managed identity. So what we would do is we would add that new managed identity to the user-defined database role that controls the user data schema and remove the main application identity from that role. So I want to grab this. I'm going to insert a new slide, and we're going to delete these, paste that in here, okay? And then I'm going to grab a rectangle. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to copy it. And I want to make it the same size as that. There we go. Edit text, UDDR, user data. User data, I don't know, worker. Let's make that wider and shorter. Delete that. Paste it. And call it system data worker. And user defined database role. Oh, it all fits. Good. Copy that. Paste it here. Get rid of that extra line break. And then edit text, Azure Managed Identity. Now, when we're running as a well-factored monolith, I'm going to shrink this like so. I'm going to add another rectangle to represent our application. Azure hosted application. Now we need some arrows. Give me an arrow. And give me another arrow. One more arrow. Now I need some text. We've got to shrink that down quite a lot. And we'll center it. All right. So our Azure hosted application runs as an Azure managed identity, which is where's my mover? Here we go. Is a member of those two roles, which grants control to, or which grants access to, our schema. Now, let's say we break this guy in half. To Azure hosted service So when we break that guy in half, this guy gets a little bit smaller. Oop. And he continues to run as managed identity 1, right? But what we do is we can make that smaller. And let's make this guy smaller too. But all we do is we create Azure Managed Identity 2 when we create our hosted service. And let's just call it an app. And we'll call this app 1. So we get shapes, arrow, Azure Hosted App 2 runs as Azure Managed Identity 2. And we just we add Azure Managed Identity 2 to the System Data Worker role in our database, and we remove Azure Managed Identity 1 from the role membership on System Data Worker. And then any of the code that still lives up in Azure Hosted Application 1 that tried to directly access system data schema where it shouldn't, breaks, and the app crashes, and the managers freak out, and so on. And that's when I say, hey, we'll fix it. That shouldn't have happened in the first place because nobody should be accessing data outside of their lane. Makes sense? I hope so. It makes sense to me, and it's a really nice, convenient model that doesn't introduce the complexity of a distributed system up front when we're just trying to get from nothing to something. But it does give us a path to fracture these larger applications into smaller services later if we need to. It does come with a higher requirement of discipline amongst the developers and the designers on the application, but that's nothing a little bit of code review can't help. As long as the people doing the review understand the concepts and the why and can explain that to newer team members. And that model doesn't really incur a whole lot more programming overhead than just the big tangled ball of yarn. So we have our database is running in Azure. Our artificial intelligence model is also running in Azure, but our application isn't yet. And we're actually at a really good stopping point for this morning's session. And I don't think I want to start in on moving our code up to that app service just yet. I think I'll save that for this afternoon because there is a little bit of prep work and a little bit of homework that I need to do to be able to make that happen smoothly this afternoon. So for now, I think I want to call this a session just to review. Let's take a look at our RG resources. And TDD, that developer dad, resource group, resources. And we've got our GM Tools AI service and our GM Tools-SQL is the SQL Server that hosts the GM Tools data database. And we can come in here and we should be able to look at some of the data. Nope. Query editor preview. Yeah, I'm not gonna, okay, well, yeah. Let's see if it'll let me log in as me. Cool. And we can actually see our tables, and we can even go select star from userdata.npcs. Run that, and we have a human knight with all kinds of details created earlier today, and their name is Gareth Stone. Groovy. So yeah, this is getting shape. This is shaping up. So we've got our resources. We've also got a virtual network inside the resource group. Here we are. We've got this VNet TDD private resources. Now within the subscription, oh gosh, I've already spent 2 cents on this. Oh my, what will I do? What have I spent my 2 cents on? Yeah, in the AI model. Okay. But I should have so I've got a couple of resource groups. I've got the resources. The app hosts needs to move to EastUS 2 instead of EastUS. I should probably also move RG-admin to EastUS 2 as well. And I had to use EastUS 2 because that's where it was going to let me create my SQL Server. The downside to that is the AI model that I wanted to use is only available in EastUS, and I don't feel like paying inter-regional transfer costs. So we've got our app hosts, and this is where we're going to be putting our app service. And I think what I need to do is delete these resources and recreate them in EastUS 2. Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, I do need to move it to EastUS 2. So I'm going to delete that and its resource group and recreate it in EastUS 2 so that it's in the same area as my database and language model. And we should be okay. All right. I think that's a good morning. We've got our services stood up. We know they're working from our software. And now it's time to start talking about moving the software up out of my laptop and into the cloud. So until this afternoon, I say take care of yourselves, eat some good food, drink some good water or coffee or whatever, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, folks.